I'm Abby, and I'm here to talk to you about the science of light. There's so many things we could talk about, and I have so many questions, but let's just start with what's most familiar to me, which is life on this planet. Because there are organisms that make their own light. They create bioluminescence. And it's across kingdoms. You have funguses doing it. You have insects like blowbugs. And then you have those creatures that live deep down in the ocean, the super deep, dark part of the ocean where there's no light, and yet they're creating their own. Which leads me to so many questions. Like, first of all, how is it doing it? There's no place to plug in. How are they creating their own light? That's just incredible. And then you think about what that would be like. You live in total darkness. You've never seen light before, and then incoming. Wonder what that experience would be like. And then I start to think about how it's going to illuminate this face, this very otherworldly face. The creatures in the bottom of the ocean look so different than the creatures on the land. And that makes me start to think about other worlds. Because I've been hearing so much about all these discoveries of all these planets I've been finding. And they keep talking about finding all these Earth-like planets. And I'm so excited. And yet I don't know how they know, because we can't actually observe these planets directly, because space is too big. Now, to give an example of this, we actually measure the distance of space by light. It's the speed of light. So we measure things in light years. So our closest star is 4.2 light years away, and that seems reasonable. Until you actually think about the distance it's actually covering. 1 light year covers 6 trillion miles, or 9.7 trillion kilometers. And that's just 1 year, so multiply that by 4.2, and then you get the idea that this is way out there. So how do we know where these are and how why are they Earth-like? How do we know? And it's all from light. We're learning all this information through light, and it's very exciting. So first thing you want to be familiar with is the idea that light, when it passes through a prism, it's going to divide up. So white light is actually made of all the wavelengths of light. You're familiar with, at the end of a rainstorm, you often see a rainbow. That's actually light hitting, again, another medium, in this case, water particles, and it's dividing the light up, and it's dividing it because of speed. So the red wavelength, even though it's a larger wavelength, moves faster through the prism than violet. Higher frequency, but slower, and so that's why it always ends up on the bottom. And that's a great way of seeing, again, energy, and we want to kind of expand this, because when we observe the universe, we have to see so much more. Now, visible light is the only thing we're familiar with. To give some sort of perspective about how much more information we're missing if we were just observing with our eyes. If this spectrum, you could take it all the way and you stretch it from New York City, take gamma rays, put it there, then stretch it out to LA, all the way to radio waves. What we could see is the width of a dime.
Wow.
So ultraviolet light, we're familiar with this because of the way that birds and bees and insects can all see these other colors in flowers. We also experience it as a sunburn. Infrared, you actually experience this heat from your body, and that's how night vision goggles work, is they're actually looking at the heat radiating off objects and ideally living organisms. Radio waves, you're familiar with it when you turn on the radio. You hear music, but those sounds are actually going into outer space. And then there's the SETI Institute, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They're listening to outer space. They're listening to radio waves. They are trying to hear a signal being sent out. So they're actually listening for life, which I think is super exciting. But we can still tell more by light. So we can use visible light to determine quite a bit about the stars. Blue is a high frequency and it's high intensity, so it's actually hotter. So a baby blue star, when it's just formed, is bright blue. It burns away. But new solar system, if one has even formed yet. So we're not going to find life there. Yellow star, right in the midlife, it's turning hydrogen into helium, it's sort of a steady state, so we kind of want to find stars like that. Red giants are stars that have fused all their elements up to iron, and they're just about to expand and explode in a supernova. Super cool. Not where we're going to find life. So, to find those Earth-like habitable planets, we actually have to find a little more information. We also want to know what's on there. How do they tell us, like, they say, oh, it's got this element and this element, and it's like this, and I'm like, that's so many details, how do you know? We actually use a spectrometer. What this does is it takes apart light and it looks for the signals of any element in its gas form. Different elements will actually emit or absorb different wavelengths of light. And so each one of them has its own little fingerprint or barcode. And so when a star is actually passing through, the light passes through the atmosphere, and it gives us a different reading, and we can start to see these different elements present. And we're comparing them to the one that we did for Earth. We're looking for oxygen, we're looking for methane, we're looking for nitric oxide, we're looking for all these elements that are familiar to us for life. And I find that super exciting. Like, can't wait. And at the same time, I still know that the only life we know of that regularly astounds me is the life we find on Earth. It's so diverse, it's so amazing, and it produces its own light. It's incredible, bioluminescence. How does it do it? And then I keep thinking about silly things too, like how does it turn it on and off? And if a glow bug can't turn it off, can it sleep at night? Can it sleep with the lights on? Questions lead you to questions, but that leads to discovery and it leads to science. So may I encourage you to enjoy, explore, discover the universe just by something simple as looking at light.